it's Healtodeath. I'm here to do a review / breakdown on HBO's The Last of Us series episode 2. Just a reminder, there will be spoilers in this video, as well as some spoilers from the game up until the moments that we saw at the end of the second episode of the show. I do my best not to talk about the game as a whole so that I don't spoil anything for people who haven't played yet, but are interested in the series. First off, this episode felt super short. I know it was actually shorter than the premiere episode, and it seems like we're getting through the story already really fast, which isn't really a negative or positive thing. I just wanted to mention that because most people that I talked to were like, oh my gosh, the time went by so quick, which I thought it did as well. So this episode already started a lot different than anything we experienced in the game. We actually started in Indonesia, which is really cool because during both part 1 and part 2 of the games, we never really talk about or hear about other parts of the world. So it was really neat to start somewhere else and kind of see what happened on their side. We start with a woman who I believe is a professor who specializes in fungus. We get a really neat scene where she inspects some of the cordyceps underneath a microscope. I really love the buildup in the beginning of this. We see her very comfortable in her lab, very familiar with what it is. But all of a sudden, this realization when we learn that the sample came from a human and what that might mean. I really love this cadaver scene. She's very uncomfortable here, as she should be. And so with her discomfort, it makes us uncomfortable. And then of course we get this scene where we kind of know what to expect here as she makes the realization that this fungus has entered in the body through a bite mark and then has kind of infested it throughout. And then she finds these tendrils in the mouth of this dead body, which I thought was really neat to see because they're still kind of active and moving about, kind of looking to see if this host is suitable or if they can attach somewhere else. I thought the scene was really powerful and the conversation immediately after because this woman knows, right? She has studied fungus her entire life and she knows that it's practically the end of the world if they have found a way to live within humans. I also like the extra information we got on the couch here. We don't necessarily know that this is ground zero for this outbreak or if this was the first time we see it, but I do like seeing this understanding and this panic for what's to come by a professional. The military briefly mentioned finding a vaccine or a cure, to which she responds that there is no cure, there is no vaccine, pretty much that you can't do anything about this and you just need to annihilate, yes, her city, her home is pretty much what she's saying because she knows how bad this is. I also like that it kind of touches on some conversations that have happened after many people have played the game on whether or not even a vaccine or a cure is in fact possible with this type of organism. We do know that the Fireflies very much believe it's possible. They touch a lot on the topic of hope, but whether or not it's actually doable is another thing. And I like how they briefly mention that in the beginning of this. Another great line that we hear on this couch is, "But who bit her?" We don't know. I don't think it matters that we know, but that line just adds to the panic of everything that is happening. Then we get this really great scene between Joel, Tess, and Ellie. I think we get some really great interactions between the three of these characters. There's a couple of moments here that made me kind of giggle, which I enjoyed. But what's really cool about this part is we kind of see Tess's shift and her also being taken over by this idea of hope. Don't get me wrong, Tess is still very rough around the edges, but you do see her get very interested in the fact that Ellie is immune and what that could mean for the future. I do want to highlight one line here, and it's from Joel. He talks about hearing this a million times. We've heard about miracle vaccines, cures, and none of it works, is what he says. So I like that as viewers, we're let in on the fact that this isn't the Fireflies' first rodeo with this, right? It sounds like they've been constantly trying to solve this problem, and none of it ends up being anything that helps. So very early on, we learn about Joel's stance with the Fireflies and whether or not he believes that they can actually resolve any of this, to which is no, he doesn't think they can. And he's saying that with someone like Ellie right in front of him. He's saying that knowing that Ellie has been bitten and she hasn't turned. So if anything was gonna change your mind on whether or not a vaccine or a cure could be made, Ellie would spark that in you. So if he doesn't think that with Ellie in front of him right now, a girl that he really doesn't care about in any way, will he ever think that? I think that's important information to kind of think about now and to hold on to. I gotta say here, I really love when Ellie mumbles under her breath in a couple of these moments. I just felt like it was great acting, but then also it added to some of the comedic timing of the lines. Like where she mentions she'll just throw a sandwich at the infected. I really enjoyed those. Then we get to go with them as they walk around the city in the daytime. The scenery here is so amazing. You guys know it. It is so awesome to see the towers leaning. You get to see actual craters from bombs going off. They even talk about that, which I thought was nice. You kind of learn that and figure it out as you played the game, but to hear them actually talk about it, I thought was a nice detail. These scenes were just so cool, and there's so much detail in the environment, but also just seeing Ellie's backpack and Joel's backpack and just how much of it looks exactly like the game. It's always nice to find those moments in this series so far, so I have to mention them every time I see them because I just love them so much. The conversations that happen here are really cool as well. We got an early hint about clickers. We saw some very worried faces from Joel and Tess, but we also heard of an advanced stage of the infected, which just sound like myths or made up stories. I really like that touch. I think it's very cool. Tess kind of laughed at it and shrugged it off. But then when clickers were mentioned, things got very serious. It's also interesting how early we get to learn a little bit about when Ellie was bitten. We do learn that in the game and in Left Behind, but it didn't come this early for us. So it's kind of nice to get part of that right off the bat, even though we're still missing a lot of that story. And then there was a great little Easter egg that we got to see during this walking scene. We saw a little giraffe stuffy underneath a car. Those who've played the game know the importance of this giraffe stuffy. If you haven't played the games, it's definitely something you want to remember now and recall back a little later. Then the three of them go into a hotel. We get a little bit of dialogue here that's later on in the game about whether or not Joel has stayed at a hotel before. I love this dialogue. This scene was really fun. Ellie had some great lines here and some not so great comebacks, but it made for some good laughs. In this area, we also learned that Ellie can't swim. So we get to check that box off for this series being truthful to Ellie's traits. And again, the interaction on how we learn that is super great, with a little bit of comedy snuck in there because of Joel and Ellie's banter. We get a really interesting little moment here as well after Ellie gets scared by the dead body and kind of falls down a bit. Joel helps her up, but then he kind of pulls back, remembering that he's grabbing her and her arm that is infected. I really like that moment because you can kind of see Joel going back to his autopilot, as I called it before. He's acting like a gentleman or a father figure or just even a kind person. And then all of a sudden he realizes, oh my gosh, no, what am I doing? I don't want to touch her. She's infected. Because he's still a little concerned about that, right? I like that moment. Again, we get to see Joel kind of revert back to his old self for just a glimpse. Then we move forward and we have Joel and Ellie who get a little bit of time alone as Tess goes and scouts ahead as well as opens a door for them. We've got Ellie playing with her knife as Joel jealously looks at it because all of his shivs break. Just kidding. No, but we do get some good conversation here. We learn a little bit of history that we didn't get in the game as far as I'm aware. We get to learn where Tess is from, as well as how long an infected actually lasts. I thought this was just really cool information and pretty interesting. Joel mentions that they can live a couple of months, but there are some that have been walking around for 20 years or so. I like extra information like that because it kind of gives the viewer the ability to think why that might be, why some might only live a few months, why they would die out, and why others would live so long and what might contribute to that longevity. I also really like how many times Tess proves how well she knows Joel in this episode. She doesn't even see Joel and she yells at him to put his gun down because she knows that he's holding it ready to shoot because of the noises that she created. I just like little moments like that. It's a really quick way to tell the viewers that these two have been together for a long time. As we make it to the rooftop with these three, we learn some new things about the infected that's specific to this series and is a little different from the game. It seems like in the series, they're making the infected work more like a hive mind, which I don't hate. To be fair, when you played the game, any type of noise you made made attracted them anyways, and they all kind of came rushing. So even though it was a different way to activate them all, you still got kind of rushed by multiples if you messed up. So in the game, it was more from sound. In this, what concerns me is it sounds like it could be just from stepping on the wrong thing. In this actual episode, it seems more so that when one is killed or like an infected is shot, then it kind of communicates. But it did also sound like if you step on the wrong growth or spore, that it might alert other infected nearby. Again, I don't hate this, and I think one of the reasons why is because stuff like this actually exists in nature. So while it's different, it's not hard to believe, and I'm okay with that. The view from the rooftop was pretty, I was gonna say interesting, but it's actually kind of nasty. We see a bunch of infected just crawling on the ground, and from far away, it just looks gross. They look almost like insects or something down there on the street. What I thought was interesting, and you'll have to tell me what you think, is it seemed like they were responding to the sunlight in a negative manner. I don't really know if it was specific to the sun or they were just trying to show that they are all connected and they work like a hive mind. Then we get to head to our museum, and before we actually go inside, this is when we get some more information about how this fungus and how the infected work differently in this show. So we see Joel inspecting some of this fungus, which has grown its way outside. He's able to kind of break through it, showing that it is dry, which he mentions is an indication that most likely the infected inside are also dried out or dead. I thought this moment was enjoyable. I like the idea of them having a little bit of an understanding of what they're getting into before actually entering. And it's also a neat way to kind of guess the level of how dangerous it is inside of a building. So my thoughts are, if it's really dried up like this, then it's one of two things. Either it's pretty safe because everything's dried up like Joel was hoping for, or it's old and the things that are left in there have had time to reach different stages. So you're not gonna run into runners, you're gonna run into things that are further down the evolutionary path than the runners. I also like the idea of them coming across a building with very moist fungus on the outside to show how active it currently is, and that's probably a place you want to avoid. So different from the game, but it also kind of works with the game. It's just something we didn't know or use in the game. So again, I kind of like this. The next scenes were so cool, and I know everyone that's played, we're super excited to see the set design of this place, and of course, to see the clickers in action. So many great shots in this scene that looked exactly like the game. It felt very cool to be in here. The clickers were spot on. The sound, the movement, the way they looked. I am so happy that they used prosthetics and makeup to make the clickers, and they didn't try to rely on CGI for them. I just think that gave them such a natural and organic look, and it made them that much creepier. I did watch the clips after the show on the making of this episode, and one of the things that was mentioned is the people that were acting as the clickers were fans of the game, and therefore they already knew how to kind of embody the clicker and move like them, and it totally showed on camera, and it was wonderful. I think there was also some pretty cool moments here. We have Tess that uses the axe, which is a melee weapon, so you can use those against clickers. We also get this really cool part where Joel shoots the clicker in the head, and then it turns towards him, and then starts coming at him, and then he shoots it in the head again, and then it falls, which is very reminiscent of the game. You usually have to hit them twice in the head before they go down, so I think that was for the players there. I did enjoy that. Another thing I have to mention about the set design here is because it's so much like the game, there was even moments in my head where I'm literally looking at a display case and like, I hid behind that. I ran around that trying to avoid a clicker. I was there. And I just think that's so cool. Once we make it out of the museum, we get our moment with Tess. I have to admit, Anna Torv, I believe her name is, she did a really good job with Tess. And in this moment, she does the perfect flip with her emotions and the way she delivers her lines. You can tell she's extra stressed here. You can tell she wants to hurry. You can tell she doesn't have a lot of patience and she's kind of angry and mad. And if you've played the games, you know why. And if you haven't here, you kind of think, oh, well, that was an awful experience. She's annoyed. She sprained her ankle, all this stuff. But that switch that she did was really good, and it was very easy to follow her emotions here. Just as a side note, those of you who are sad that we're not getting craft time with Joel, we at least got to see him use some tape to help with Tess's ankle. So even though he didn't craft a first aid kit, it was pretty cool to see him use one of his resources. We also get our very similar rooftop scene as Ellie, Joel, and Tess cross the wooden plank. And then we do get Joel's glance at his watch. It happened in the cutscene in the game, and it did happen here. It's the first time you see Joel get reminded of Sarah because of Ellie. I'm glad that they put that moment in and didn't skip over it. It's a really important moment. Okay, so then we get to the Capitol and we have the big change here. In the show, they decided to have the infected come to the Capitol and kind of overwhelm them instead of having Fedra. This is another change I'm fine with. I know I say that a lot, but I really am. I'm okay with these changes. We were talking about the infected already. We were learning a lot more about them. We saw the horde outside, which was really interesting, but also kind of eerie. And so with this, we got to see a little bit more on how they work, how they're more like a hive mind, and how shooting one is kind of a tripwire for activating others. This whole scene was amazing. Again, these actors are doing a beautiful job. Tess's moments here were so perfect. I loved every second of her acting here. You can really tell that they tried to embody these characters the best they could. Even the way that she shows her bite mark, it's the same attitude, it's the same lines, it's just very well done. We get such a short time with Tess in the game and in the show, and I just think Anna Torv, I think her name is, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, just did a really outstanding job giving so much depth to this character. The way she talks to Joel here, you can kind of tell that they had a thing together, but she never really comes out and says that. At the same time, she's also showing her new sparked hope that Ellie might actually be able to make a difference and that they might be part of the reason why Ellie can make a difference. We also get reminded again that Tess is a badass. She knows she's gonna die, and if she's gonna die, she's gonna take out as many infected as she can with her. She's such a good character. I'm really sad that we don't get more time with her. I'm gonna be honest. I liked her in the game, but I really liked her in this series. And saying goodbye, I think, was even tougher for me this time around. We also get a really good line from her where she tells Joel to save who you can save. This is just, again, one of those moments where she knows Joel so well. She knows what words will almost activate him to take action. So after hearing that, he immediately grabs Ellie and immediately just goes. No goodbyes, no time for emotions, just goes. And then we get the scene which it was different. I think that, okay, I'm talking about this like weird, it's almost like a kiss scene between the infected and Tess. What I think they were showing here is that the infected can tell when somebody else is infected, right? The mob kind of ignores her as they go in. And then there's this one that does see her. And this moment, it was uncomfortable, right? Like everybody just felt uncomfortable in this moment. But I also think they wanted to show that they were kind of communicating in a way, like, hey, you're one of us. Let's connect lines now. I think it was just used as kind of a shock value to make it eerie and creepy and to make you kind of go, ugh. Yeah, it was just one of those scenes where they did that. What I am very happy about in this scene, though, is that she was in fact able to light that darn lighter. I thought once that infected came over, she wasn't going to continue to try to light her lighter and it wasn't going to blow up, and that would have made me really upset. So I'm glad she was still able to do that. I'm glad that she was still able to take out so many, and that Joel and Ellie were able to escape. And that's where that episode ended, and it just felt like it went by so fast. It was crazy. So far, what I'm getting out of this series is that I really appreciate that it's not an exact copy of the game. The changes that they're making, I keep saying that I'm okay with, and I really do mean that. When I think about why that is, I think it's because if they would have made this an exact copy, it would have been enjoyable for us to watch, but I can't say that I would be as invested as I am with the new information that they keep giving us. This game was so enjoyable and the story was amazing, and the fact that they're giving us more of that is really satisfying. I think it's something that most of us really want, as long as it's done well, and so far it is. I mean, who doesn't want more of The Last of Us, right? So All this extra stuff feels really great. But yeah, that's my review and my recap of the episode. I just had one more thought about this whole thing. And if HBO is listening, which they're not, because I average like 200 views a video, but if you are, please don't Game of Thrones this. You decided to do The Last of Us. If you decide to do part 2, amazing, great, I can't wait. Do not decide to do a part 3 until that game is out and complete. Don't just start making up your own stuff and finishing the story however you want, because I think it would just make so many people so upset. But yeah, that's it. That's what I'm leaving you with. The thought of HBO taking this story and going any direction they want with it. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. And please comment and tell me what you thought of this episode. I love hearing stuff like that. If you did like this, please hit that thumbs up button and then think about subscribing if you're not already. And I will catch you next time. Bye.